My first interaction with UCI was really when I was 9, 10 years old. When, mom and dad essentially packed helped you unload your stuff. I'm coming as well, and coming to the campus. And when you're 9 or 10, I mean, you understand college as this far away thing, but it made it kind of real for me. And then we'd visit you in Mesa Court. And then sometimes in the summer, I would come visit you, and I would come play at Crawford Hall, which was the gymnasium back then that they would allow for people to students and faculty and staff and guests to play basketball. And so, I remember that. I remember some of the old restaurants that were around here, like Herschel's. There was a place called Herschel's. And spending the night at your apartment with your friends that you were living with. Kind of, UCI was very familiar to me. So if I wasn't going to stay in the San Fernando Valley, which I didn't think I was going to, UCI was kind of like a home away from home because I was so familiar with it. I'd come to Ways Goose or celebrate UCI every, I think it's usually April, right? Yeah, April for open house. And so, for me, I was doing relatively well in high school, applied to a lot of UCs and other universities, and I was always, I think I went through my phase. I think in junior high, I wanted to be an archaeologist. Then for a while, I wanted to be an FBI, CIA. I went through my phase of watching those crime dramas like Wise Guy and Crime Story and those films and shows. And then eventually the law started to, I started to get interested in the law.
Law and Order, probably.
It's been around for so long. Probably was running back then. I don't even remember. And so, as I was in high school, I was looking at schools, and one thing UCI had that most schools didn't have was a major called Criminology, Law, and Society. Back nowadays, most schools have legal studies majors, but back then they didn't. But UCI had a Criminology, Law, and Society major. I was interested in the law. I was leaning, possibly maybe the broad ideas of maybe being a lawyer, but even at that point, I was more interested in the law. And so I remember picking up I don't even know if they do it anymore, but they have like the big guide of UCI, and you can
catalog.
Look up where you look up all the different majors and the courses that are offered. And I remember I hit Criminology, Law, and Society, and it was really interesting. Victimless crimes, deviance, criminal justice system, prisons, all these really interesting law loosely related subjects. And that really got me interested in UCI. Like that was something that seemed unique and seemed like, wow, if I'm going to go to college and take classes, why don't I take classes that interest me? So I was very interested in UCI. I was also, as you know, I played basketball in high school and did really well. And, I was softly recruited by some Division II schools, some Division III schools, a lot of Division III schools. And, I got into UC San Diego, which was at the time Division II. And so I was, flirting with the idea of going to UCSD. But I always kind of had a thought that maybe I could play Division I basketball. And, UCI is a Division I school, as you know. And so, I never, I decided to make my decision based on education and not athletics. But I never in my mind completely closed the door to possibly playing basketball. So I think for me, coming to Ways Goose, actually, celebrate UCI with my girlfriend at the time who was in high school and also checking out schools, I remember that experience as being, wow, this feels great. It feels like a community. It's not too big. You're not going to get too lost in it, but it feels nice. Aldridge Park's beautiful. The weather was great. And so this was around, I started UCI in 1992. So sort of early 1992, I was exploring different schools. But I would say for me, what brought me here was familiarity, right? It seemed like the school away from home, the natural progression. I was very comfortable with UCI. The Criminology, Law, and Society major, which I ended up majoring in when I came here, and just sort of the right fit. I think that brought me here. And then obviously, similar to you, I think we had similar experiences. I started out my first year working at the Grants and, Grants and Proposals office down in the main administration building.
Were you work study? I was work study.
Yeah, I think I was work study for the first year. And actually, I had a tough time my first quarter. I was not comfortable. Not because of UCI, I was just homesick. I was homesick. And then throw on top of that the girlfriend I had at the time, but we both came to UCI, sort of dumped me for somebody else after 6 weeks, which is not an uncommon experience for college students. So I was like homesick, lovesick, and down in the dumps. I sprained my ankle playing basketball, so then I couldn't exercise. So I just kind of, hung out in the dorm at Mesa Court in Viento. I was in Viento, and made some friends and focused on studying, really. And that was my first year. And then when I went home, then, I decided to try to walk on and get on the basketball team at UCI, which is really hard to do because as Division I, they offer scholarships. And so, it's really hard thing to take on. And so that summer was all about training and preparation and working, at a summer job at Bank of America. I think I was a teller. And that was a big experience, I think. That was a big moment for me when I came back my sophomore year. I was really focused on trying to make this team. And like I said, the deck was stacked. So all the scholarship players got free shoes because that's part of the sponsorship. They don't give the walk-ons new shoes until you make the team. So immediately I was separated as different. And I had to, every running drill we did, I came in first. I gave them no reason to cut me or let me go from the team, essentially. And so I hung around long enough, and I made the team. And then after that, back then you can only travel 12 to 13 students. When the basketball team travels to another university for a game, you only take 12 or 13. The team is made up of about 16. And I made the traveling team, which was really good. So, and I played a little bit at times as a backup point guard. And so I was living my dream. So because I loved basketball as a kid, and here I am now playing Division I basketball, and here I am pursuing the dream I had here at UCI, right? And at the same time, I'm also at the major I loved, which was Criminology, Law, and Society. And I've, great mentors. Henry Pontel, white collar crime, taught me, took classes on white-collar crime, deviance, victimless crimes, Kitty Calavita, John Dombrink, Joan Peter Celia. A lot of these faculty are still here at UCI or have just retired and are emeritus. And so great mentors. I was a research assistant, not an RA, although eventually I became an RA,
That's right.
a resident advisor my senior year. But I was a research assistant in the Criminology, Law, and Society department for Henry Pontel. And then eventually I became a resident advisor at Campus Village, which is the apartment complex at the time for students undergraduate students at the time who wanted to live on campus. And so I was very active. I was a student, I was on SPOP, Student Parent Orientation Program, and I was a staffer for 2 years. You did it 1 year or 2 years?
1 year.
Ah, you did it 1 year. I did it too. I was very active, both academically, in terms of clubs and organizations. I was very active there, and then athletically. So I didn't have a lot of free time. Trying to maintain your grades was really hard because, basketball is a huge commitment in terms of, we're talking, 3 to 4 hours a day, and then when you travel, you're away.
No, you were always a hard worker.
I had to really work hard. But you see, I was loving school. I loved the experience. I loved the different dimensions of my experience. And, again, I was interested in law when I came in, and then I continued my interest through the major, and I applied to law school, essentially. But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, my senior year as a basketball player, there was a couple of real defining moments. One, I became the university's Rhodes Scholar candidate, and that was something it was an internal competition at UCI that James Danziger, I think, ran, and I was a Rhodes Scholar candidate, which was a really interesting experience. You had to have 8 letters of recommendation, a physical, go through a physical, and you had to write like a personal statement about how you would change the world, and it was like at that level. And so that really got me focused on law school, I think. And going through that experience, I didn't end up becoming a Rhodes Scholar, but I was the university's candidate and went through that process. But that convinced me that I think the way I felt I could effectuate change was maybe going to law school. Although I contemplated getting a PhD at the time, which eventually I did get a PhD. But so you know, I think my senior year, that was a defining experience. That being a Rhodes Scholar candidate and going through that process, being a resident advisor at Campus Village, and then I tore my ACL, my anterior cruciate ligament, on the basketball team. And so while I applied to law school, I ended up delaying my decision to go to law school for a year, and then I worked for a year at the Graduate School of Management in the Healthcare Executive MBA program. So immediately I was an employee of the university, and that was a great experience.